Okay. Oh, we're already doing the recording. All right. All right, then. We're already going right into it. That's great. All right, everyone scan the QR code for attendance. First meeting if you're a candidate. Again, I'll have this up at the end of the meeting. We'll finish one more minute. No, yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I always forget to do that. Ah, man, today's just been a weird day today. All righty, so this is a big meeting. Very, very excited to have this man come speak to us today. Peter Olinto from UWORLD will be coming to speak to us today. I do have a little introduction for him, even though I don't think he needs any introduction, but I figured why not? I introduce him. So Peter Olinto has a 20-year plus history teaching with Becker and now UWORLD back in July of 2023. He just recently joined us, but his career didn't start there. He received his bachelor's of business administration from Pace University in 1990. After working in audit in Deloitte, Pete attended law school at Fordham University School of Law in New York City, and he earned his doctor's degree with dreams of becoming a tax attorney. While at school, Pete ventured into teaching, starting with the LSAT and the SAT prep, and eventually leading into the CPA review. So he now does teach the review courses for FAR, Reg, Beck section of the CPA exam. This was before the evolution came out this year, as well as CPA courses on various topics. And at UWORLD, he loves bonding with coworkers and students. Legend has it that if you pass CPA exam using UWORLD, Pete is obligated to buy you a cup of coffee.
Pete, let's go.
Pete also enjoys reviewing his favorite nomics like EBOCA and teaching his courses of choice. Far outside of UWORLD, Pete is passionate about teaching the CFA review and hassling his good friend Tim Gearty. Pete's best CPA exam study advice would be you can and will do it. So as long as you are willing and able to make the sacrifice. Proper preparation requires patience, practice, and perseveration. To current CPAs completing CPA coursework, Pete recommends focusing 100% on your course and avoiding multitasking. And if Pete wasn't a CPA today, he would be a DJ. But we're sure he's glad he's here at UWORLD. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further introduction, the one, the only Peter Olinto from UWORLD. Let's make this interactive, guys. Have a lot of questions, have a lot of fun with this meeting. And Peter, I'll let you take it away from here.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an introduction. How am I going to possibly live up to that? Yes, so as was mentioned, happy to take questions along the way. So you can unmute yourselves, jump in at any point in time. So before we get started, just out of curiosity, how many of you all grew up wanting to be certified public accountants as little kids? Was that your dream growing up? No way, Jack. Come on, Gloria, you kidding me?
That was my dream to be a
wow,
yeah,
man.
Me too.
Wow, that's cool. All right. Well, unfortunately for me, that wasn't the case. I am probably the world's proudest CPA, but no, I did not grow up wanting to be a CPA. I originally went to Florida State, thought I was going to play football, was never going to happen, Jack. At best, I would have been a tackling dummy there. So that was out. I then joined Air Force ROTC down in Florida State because my brother flies F-16s in the Air Force, and I was like, that seems like an exciting way to make a living. Except when they took me up in a jet, and I quickly realized how afraid of flying I was, so that career path crashed and burned. So how did I wind up in public accounting? I had an uncle way back when, it was called the Big 8, and he was a partner of one of those Big 8 firms, and he explained to me all the opportunities that having a degree in accounting and public accounting experience could offer. And the only thing I knew about my uncle at the time, I didn't even know what CPA stood for. I just knew he had 2 big homes, 2 big cars, and his big fat boat down the Jersey Shore. And I was like, damn, I want to be a CPA too. So I took his advice. And yes, I did realize, and what he explained to me was very true. So obviously you all know all the different industry areas you can get involved in audit. So whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, retail, there's so many different things you could do. In tax, obviously, you have individual, corporate, partnership, gift, estate, trust, compliance, planning, and then all the advisory and consulting services when you have that background in accounting. But it all starts with getting certified. So what I tell every student, you need to look at the CPA exam the same way law students look at the bar exam. It's unheard of to go 3 years to law school and not pass the bar. You will have wasted a lot of time and money if you did that. How could you have 150 credit hours in accounting and not be certified? Now, other than Jack and Gloria, I think the most of us, our motivation for studying for the CPA exam is going to be more about the money and opportunity, not so much our pure love of accounting. So if you want to get the biggest return on that investment for the 5 years you put into getting your degree in accounting, you got to finish the job. I got good advice from my uncle about multitasking, and you don't want to work full time and try to study for the CPA exam simultaneously. If you can avoid doing that, you want to get the CPA out of the way first. Obviously, you hear the horror stories about public accounting and the hours that they work, but there's a busy season. It's not all year. For most people, it might be 3 months, maybe 4 months, and then the rest of the year it levels off. And for a lot of people in audit, the summertime is, if you enjoy the summers, you get a lot of free time. So, there isn't an ebb and a flow to it unless you're still trying to pass the CPA while working full time. Then all of a sudden you work that busy season, and then what would have been time off, instead for you, you're going to spend the next 6, 7, 8 months studying for the CPA exam. And then by the time you're done with that, hopefully you roll back into your next busy season and you never get a break. And thus people get very frustrated with the profession and wind up leaving public accounting. So you don't want to have that happen. That 5th year is your golden opportunity to get that CPA out of the way so that when you start working, you no longer have to worry about that exam. And by the way, it is still a very academic exam. So for the most part, the longer you're out of school, the harder it's going to be to pass. So while this information is relatively fresh in your mind, your goal is to bang that out sooner rather than later. I don't know how many of you all are going to take a master's program, but if you're not and you're going to choose your extra 30 credit hours on your own, don't choose golf. Do not choose the path of least resistance. You are not going to be investing in yourself and your future if you waste those extra 30 credit hours. So there's a lot of classes you could take, whether it be if you want to kind of focus on accounting and maybe you have a passion for finance, a lot of finance classes that have overlap with accounting, or maybe you're an IT person, information systems, data analytics, whatever it may be. But don't choose easy classes because it's the path of least resistance. You want to make sure you use those extra credit hours wisely, and I'll give you some advice about that as we move along. So pretty much the UWorld program, my first touch point with UWorld was probably over 10 years ago when I was working at that other course. I can't remember the name, but they had a USMLE program trying to get doctors through their different board exams. And this course called UWorld was dominating. And eventually that other course got rid of their medical program because they could not compete with this UWorld course. So UWorld started out preparing doctors, nurses for their high stakes exams. So they get it. This is what they do. Exams that can change the rest of your life. Then it moved on to bar review. So the gentleman who actually started this bar review and then wound up selling it to UWorld, we used to teach CPA review together. He raved about this company. That was my second touch point. And then ultimately, UWorld decided that they were going to get into accounting, finance, which obviously ties to the verticals that I'm in. So they originally had their UWorld course. They first branched out into accounting by buying the Roger CPA Review. And I don't know if you know anything about Roger Phillip, but he is world-renowned, super smart, but incredibly funny, engaging, high energy. And his style is what kind of lured me to UWorld because, we have very similar styles. And obviously, we want to teach you in a way that you're likely to remember this mountain of information exam day. So with the similar styles, that's being embraced by UWorld, which was very fortunate for me. So I made the jump to join Roger. They also acquired Wiley Efficient Learning, who had some world-renowned CPA review instructors who are also authors of some of the best-selling tax textbooks, both individuals and entities. And then, with the UWorld team, they really consolidated and brought in the best of the best. So it's not just CPA review. I also do CFA, if anybody has any interest in that credential, but they do CMA and the other credentials, as you can see. UWorld, because of not only their talent pool, but the technology that they're using across all of these various high stakes exams is going to be very effective, most importantly, the 94% pass rate. But there are certain ways that you can utilize the product so it's far more efficient in terms of the time and effort you have to put in. There's no shortcuts to passing. However, with the volume of information you have on the CPA exam, one of the common issues and hurdles for CPA candidates is they don't know when they're comfortable enough that they feel confident enough to move on to the next topic. So every chapter you're tempted to be lured in and an OCD on, and you don't feel like you've done well enough or know enough to move on to the next topic. Well, with the software that UWORLD has put together, you've now going to have certain metrics that when you meet them, you know you're meeting the confidence interval required to move on to that next topic. And I'll talk more about that on the back end. So the competitive advantage, getting your CPA before you start working full time, I will tell you that will set you apart in the workplace. I just came from Deloitte here in New Jersey yesterday, the Morristown office. You would not believe between the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Philly offices that there are hundreds of people working full time who have not passed the exam. And what's even worse, you have people who are up for manager who cannot get promoted because they do not have their CPA. And there's like a $40,000 bonus in income when you go from senior to a manager level. So obviously there's a financial incentive, but the people are doing well in the firm wants to promote these people. So how does that happen? Obviously, Deloitte is recruiting the best and the brightest from all over the nation. These people obviously are still at the firm. They're doing really well. Why can't they pass the CPA? They quickly become a victim of their own success. Having not passed the exam before they started working full time, many of them had a part or two, but they did not complete the remaining parts within whatever time period was required at the time, 18 months. And then they wound up losing credit for parts they passed on the front end, which is awful. And it's not that these people don't have the technical ability, they certainly do, but they lack the time. So as you're doing well at the firm, which is great, you're going to be in higher demand. The more demand you're in, the less time you have available to study, and then lo and behold, you're stuck. That is not going to happen to you. So our job is to make sure you're motivated after this to start. As a matter of fact, Jack, tonight, I think you're running a study group, right? In the library, we're going to study pension accounting. Is that what we're going to do? I think so. So yeah, he's shaking it. Yeah. So the goal is to get you motivated to get this done sooner rather than later. Okay. So with respect to passing as soon as possible, obviously, this exam is predominantly academic in nature. There's no way you could practice day in, day out and do individual tax, corporate tax, be an auditor, do analytic. It's just not happening. So everybody has an area where they're going to focus, whether it be audit, tax, IT, whatever. So look, because the exam for the most part is very academic, there's an order in which you want to take the parts so that the topics that are fresh in your mind right out of school, you take those parts first. And then what you do for a living, if you're an audit or tax, you want to leave those parts for last. Because the AICPA now wants to reward you for your work experience. Where the exam has gotten more practitioner-based is that they've reduced the amount of memorization and multiple choice and increased what they've called the task-based simulations. It's now a 50-50 split. So if you've been doing audit or you've been doing tax returns, you'll see that the simulations simulate what it is you do on the job. So your internships, your new hire training, any work experience that will benefit you on the exam. So the parts that are going to be most academic for you, you'll sit for first. I'll talk about that. And then the parts where, if you have to finish up a part or two while working full-time, your full-time work experience will actually increase your probability of passing rather than reducing it. Most firms incentivize you, if you don't know this, but a lot of the firms, if you pass in the first year, it could be a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 bonus. So obviously it would be nice to get that bump in income as well. And I want you to talk to people, except for Jack and Gloria, who love accounting. Everybody else is motivated by money and opportunity. Talk to people in public accounting firms who are getting contacted regularly by headhunters trying to lure them away from their firm to go to corporate America because they're in such high demand. But that's for the people who have the work experience and the CPA. For the people who have the work experience but don't have the CPA, the number of opportunities is significantly smaller, and the dollar amount that they would be offered to switch into corporate America is going to be significantly lower. So obviously you want to put yourself in the best position to have more opportunities and make more money. You all, FDU here, by the way, next year we got to do this in person. I'm kind of like around the block from you guys. I'm in Morris County, but at some point, hopefully I'll get to visit your school in person. But many of you may not be working in New Jersey for one reason or another. So if you get hired in Connecticut or Pennsylvania or New York, whatever it is, you generally want to meet the state requirements. You just want to make sure academically, whatever state you want to get licensed in, there are no surprises. You use those 30 credit hours wisely so that you're eligible to get licensed in that state. Here are just the rules for New Jersey, obviously, because you're a Jersey school. Many of you probably know this already. So no surprises here. But if you think you're going to move to California, Florida, Texas, we have experts in every state that'll walk you through what the academic requirements are to be eligible to be licensed in those other states. You contact us and we'll walk you through it. So your CPA exam game plan. Every CPA still has to sit for 3 parts. Everyone's going to take the accounting, financial accounting and reporting, audit, and tax, which is really tax and business law, what we used to call regulation. Everyone's got to take those 3 parts, no issue. The 4th part, you get a choice. It's called a discipline. You could choose between tax compliance and planning, which is no-brainer. If you're going to go tax, that'll be the discipline you're going to sit for. If you're audit, you've got a choice. If you've got a minor in information systems or you fancy yourself an IT guru, then obviously you're going to want to sit for the part called information systems and controls. If you're going to go audit, but you're not an IT person, you're going to want to sit for the bar exam, okay, the business analysis and reporting. Or if you think you're going to go consulting or advisory, non-traditional audit, you'd want to sit for the bar exam. So you get to choose one of those disciplines. Now, the order in which you all are going to study, you ready? If you think you're going to go audit for a living, you should sit for financial and accounting reporting first. Chances are you're not going to be doing a statement of cash flow while you're working full-time or a bond amortization schedule. So while that information is fresh in your mind, you're going to sit for financial first. Then you want to sit, if you're going to go audit, you want to do regulation next, the core tax, because the longer you're out of school, you're going to start forgetting what you learned in school about tax, and tax law regularly changes. So you don't want to have to relearn new tax law because you waited too long and the rules changed. So financial, then regulation. Then for the audit people, you sit for your audit core, and then you will choose between the ISC and the bar. For the tax people, you're going to want to sit for financial first as well. Very academic. It's a final exam for intermediate 1, intermediate 2, advanced accounting. It's a lot of information. You sit for that one first. The other advantage of sitting for financial accounting first, there's no time constraint. There's no time pressure. The window of opportunity that you have to pass the remaining parts, that window of opportunity, which is now like 30 or 36 months, depending upon your state, that doesn't begin to close until you pass your first part. So I call it HIFO, hardest one in, first one out. Because if you can get financial out of the way first, it gets relatively easier. There's no excuse for not being able to finish the remaining parts within that 30 or 36 month time frame. So we do financial first. Tax people, you do audit second, because that's going to be very academic for you. You're not going to be doing that day in, day out. Then for the tax people, you do your regulation, and then you'll do your TCP, tax compliance and planning. Now, for the FAR section of the exam, as I mentioned, nothing in and of itself is all that difficult. It's just the volume of information that they throw at you. So for my audit people or anybody who's going to go advisory or consulting, there is a high correlation between your performance in FAR and your performance on the bar exam. If you have an excellent foundation in FAR, I'm talking about you don't just barely pass, you kick ass in FAR, that'll pay dividends on the bar exam as well because of the overlap in revenue recognition, leases, state, local governmental accounting, even investments in other entities, consolidations, you see a little bit in both. So the FAR exam is a good predictor of how you would perform on the bar exam. Now, the FAR exam, very different than the audit section because audit, unlike FAR, has little to no math. So when you plan out your studying for audit, you're probably looking at it 80 to 100 hours to properly prepare for the audit exam, depending upon how many classes you had in audit and whether you got an A, a B, or a C. On the other hand, the FAR section of the exam, because it's so math intensive, the FAR exam is probably going to take you approximately 150 or 160 hours to be properly prepared. And because it's so math intensive, you got to make sure you're putting in the time and effort to understand, not just memorize, but understand the formulas and the key concepts. Now, you might be saying 160 hours, that's a lot. Not really. If you're studying on average 20 hours a week, you're talking about 80 hours a month. You could theoretically knock out FAR in 2 months. Or if you say, Pete, that's very ambitious, I want to spread it over 4 months. Then you're talking about studying merely 10 hours a week. Very, very doable. So audit 80 to 100 hours, FAR about 150, 160. The regulation section, depending upon how many classes you in tax, probably 120 to 150 credit hours, 120 to 150 study hours to properly prepare for the regulation, the tax section. Now, for my audit people who think they want to do audit for a living, you should take those extra 30 credit hours you have, you should take additional classes in tax. Why? If you're going audit, why do you need the additional classes in tax? Number one, you may love the public accounting firm you're with, but decide, I don't like audit too much. I want to switch into tax. It's going to be easier for you to make a credible argument to switch into tax if you have multiple classes in taxation. Number two, when the average person on the street hears you're a CPA, what do they immediately expect you to be an expert in? Tax. And it may not even be on your radar right now, but someday you may want to have your own accounting practice. And if that's the case, you're going to be doing tax in a lot of it. So everyone should have multiple classes in taxation because you don't want to just make money on cranking returns. Chances are you're not going to be H&R Block. You can make a lot of money from your tax knowledge in understanding not only the compliance, but the planning, helping high net worth individuals or entities lawfully reduce their tax obligation to maximize their wealth. So the regulation section of the exam, like FAR, more math intensive, going to take a little bit longer to study for. Okay. Now, the ISC exam for the audit people, first of all, if you're going to be an audit, it requires a lot of IT knowledge, period. Whether you fancy yourself an IT expert or not, everything you do in the audit practice involves IT. So those extra 30 credit hours, take an additional class in IT and or data analytics will be helpful in your career if you're going to go audit. But the way the exam is broken out, these are the 4 major topics. The SOC stands for System Organizational Controls. There's a SOC 1, SOC 2 engagement. But information systems and data management is like 35 to 45%. So a class in information systems, data management, going to pay big dividends on the CPA, 35 to 45%. Security, privacy is another 35 to 45%. Lastly, the specific SOC engagements, approximately 15 to 20% of the exam. So your IT risk management, data governance, cybersecurity, privacy frameworks. For the audit people, even if you're not going to take the ISC exam, a lot of these topics are tested on the audit section as well. So high correlation between your performance on the audit core exam and the audit ISC exam. Just as an FYI, like the audit exam, there's no math involved. Approximately 100 hours to be properly prepared for ISC. The good news is no math, but the bad news is there's no math. I like the math, it adds up or it doesn't. Sometimes the non-math topics, the theory topics, the questions can be incredibly challenging. So don't underestimate the time and effort you need to put in to properly prepare. So different accounting roles, if this is your specialty, good for you. Advisory services, data solutions, helping companies with their internal controls, business continuity, information systems audit, a lot of different things you could do. For the audit people that are not interested in IT, the bar exam is really a combination of some of what used to be tested in financial accounting and reporting on the old exam and what used to be tested in BEC. So the bar exam overlap with some financial accounting, but also your cost accounting, your managerial accounting. So a lot of that you'll see on the bar exam. Business combinations, consolidations. Beautiful thing about bar, it helps you to be a better consultant someday. Not only do you understand derivative and hedge accounting, you understand why entities would want to enter into a forward, a future, or options or a swap contract to hedge some type of risk. You might have a multinational organization that, you know what, they have receivables or payables denominated in a foreign currency. You certainly don't want to see your receivables go down in value and or your payables go up in value due to a change in an exchange rate. So there's certain ways you can hedge that risk. You might have a company that's a manufacturer. Let's say they manufacture wheat. They're watching the price of wheat go down. Well, you can't sit idly by watching your future revenue go down. So you can enter into short contracts. You could sell forward or futures contracts to speculate that, hey, if the cost of this commodity goes down, you could use the profit on that derivative to offset that lower revenue. The beautiful thing is you understand now the risk management piece and the specific accounting for it. What's the journal entry and where does the profit or loss on that derivative go on the income statement or on the balance sheet? Pension plans are a great opportunity for people who have an interest in finance. You want to combine your degree in accounting, but you want to move on to Wall Street someday. You want to maybe be a pension fund manager. The folks who manage pension funds make millions of dollars. So the different types of pension plans, you have your defined contribution. There's no analytical issues. The 401k, good luck employee, set aside money. Hopefully you can retire someday if your 401k does well. We look at more pension plans from the perspective of state or local government or federal government or corporate America, where they have to invest those plan assets well enough so someday they have sufficient plan assets to service that debt as it becomes due. And then we apply the matching principle. Even though we won't pay these pension benefits for 20 or 30 years from now, you got to forecast those payments, discount them back to today, and match that pension expense with the revenue the employee helps generate in that time period. So a lot of good stuff with the pension accounting. And then your extra 30 credit hours. Take a class in data analytics. The data analytics, as I mentioned, hot topic, hot job opportunities. So if you got the extra 30 credit hours, you're not doing a MAC program, which they probably have a class anyway, take the data analytics. In addition, as I mentioned, your cost and managerial accounting. So when you forecast the time you have to put into study for bar, like FAR, probably about 160 hours. And you're like, why would anyone take bar when ISC takes a lot less time to study for? Theory-based topics sometimes have much harder questions. Math-intensive topics, sometimes you know the rule, you bang it out, you have no problem answering that question exam day. And there's no way statistically they're going to allow ISC to have an 80% pass rate, but bar is going to have a 40% pass rate. It ain't happening. So the harder the content, you would think the questions are going to be more straightforward. The easier content, the more theory-based, the harder the questions could be. So if you're interested in bar, again, lots of different roles, advisory, financial statement analysis, where you're not just calculating ratios, but you're actually analyzing the ratios, trying to understand what they mean, doing trend analysis, comparing the target company to the average for the peer group, operations management, governmental accounting. Governmental is tested in both FAR and BAR. And just as an FYI, you have that elective, take that class in governmental and not-for-profit. They're the third largest employer of CPAs behind public accounting and corporate America. And I hear you don't work so hard. Isn't that right, Jack? You work for the government, you don't work so hard. So if you want to use your knowledge and you want to take a step out of public accounting, you might want to think about the government. Okay, my tax people. Finally, they are no longer testing just compliance and cranking out returns. You still got to know your 1040, 1065, 1120, all your schedules, K1, all that good stuff. But now they're going to also focus on tax planning. So tax compliance and planning, personal financial planning, you're looking at about 30 to 40% now of this TCP exam. So that's a great return for the time you're going to put into studying, because that wealth management, that tax planning is, obviously a coveted service at a lot of big firms. And if you could do that type of work, you generally do very well. But it's not just individual planning, entity tax compliance and planning as well, probably another 30 to 40% of the exam. So that's basically 60 to 80 right there. Estate planning, that could be another 10 to 20%. And then property transactions, another 10 to 20%. So multi-jurisdictional, we're not talking about state and local governmental accounting. We're talking about multinational businesses, that have to pay tax in countries all over the world where they earn their revenue. Understanding what the tax treaty might be between the countries, understanding whether you get a credit for the taxes paid abroad or do you get a deduction, etc. In addition, great advice you can offer to clients. They're looking to form a business. Should I be an S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC, an LLP, an LP? What are the advantages and disadvantages from a tax perspective of the different forms of business? And then lastly, looking to maximize wealth by lawfully avoiding unnecessary tax payments. So TCP, again, if someday you aspire to have your own accounting practice, this is a lot of content you might use in practice someday. So the tax consulting, rather than just the tax preparer, the tax auditor, wealth manager, financial advisor, anyone who's remotely interested in finance, financial planning, what is it that you want to do? You can combine your degree in accounting with a CFP and then not only do your clients' tax returns and tax planning, but help them in terms of being a financial advisor. So a lot of good overlap there. And if you're interested in maybe, getting the CFA, being a chartered financial analyst, an equity analyst, fixed income analyst, you want to determine whether a stock should be a buy, a hold, or sell. Is it undervalued, overvalued? What should be the credit rating on a particular bond? What should be your required rate of return on a particular security? The risk you'll be assuming. A lot of fantastic opportunities if you combine your degree in accounting with a minor in finance. So, Jack, I feel like I'm giving birth to a CPA here. You getting all this stuff, Jack? Is everybody getting all this?
Oh, we're getting all this. This is all great information.
All right. So everybody's got it now, what discipline they want to sit for, the amount of time they're going to have to study, the order in which they want to take the parts. Let me tell you a little bit about how the course is set up. We get from the AICPA what's called blueprints. It tells us on each section of the exam what the weight of the topic is, and then how that topic is likely to be tested. What they've reduced significantly is the mere memorization. The remembering and understanding, that lends itself well to multiple choice, but that weight of that type of questions has gone down. It's now more application or analysis. The application could be multiple choice or task-based simulation. The analysis generally tested in a task-based simulation. And the only place we have true evaluation is an audit. So the further you go to the left, the more likely it is to be multiple choice. The further you go to the right, the more likely it is to be tested in a task-based simulation. So this way, we're going to properly prepare you for the level of difficulty for that particular question. Okay, on the new CPA exam, every part of the exam, with the exception of ISC, is a 50-50 weighting between multiple choice and task-based simulation. So first two testlets, 50% of the exam, your multiple choice. You have on average 1.5 minutes per question, but ironically, rarely would a multiple choice question take you 1.5 minutes. Some questions are designed to be answered in 20 seconds because it's easy theory. Jack, cash collected from customers. Is that operating, investing, or financing when you collect cash from your customers?
Collecting cash from customer, I would believe it'll be operating.
That's right. You get it right quickly. Now, if Jack didn't know the answer and he's going to get it wrong, he needs to guess quickly, because a question like that should not take you 1.5 minutes. Hopefully you get it right, but if you're going to get it wrong quickly, because there might be a more math-intensive question that asks you to calculate the cash collected from customers by looking at credit sales and by looking at your change in accounts receivable on a comparative balance sheet. It might ask you to calculate your cash collected from customers using the, your cash flow from operations using something called the indirect method. That might take you a lot closer to 3 minutes. If you remember nothing else from this dissertation, folks, when in doubt, move on. If you work a math-intensive question and it takes you 3 minutes and you get a number that's not one of the choices, pick your favorite letter and move on. You do not want to spend 6 or 7 minutes on an individual multiple choice. Even best case scenario, you get it right and it counts towards your score, your internal body clock is going to tell you you spent a lot of time on that question. You got to speed up. And as you start to speed up, you get a little bit nervous, the heart beats a little faster, you start making silly mistakes. And you know what the worst case scenario is? Can you imagine working 6 or 7 minutes on a question and then it doesn't even count towards your score? That's right. There are multiple choice and one of your task-based simulations that's not going to count towards your score exam day. They're randomly placed within your exam so that the examiners can, test out a question to see, is it too easy, too hard, any issues with it? Okay, your task-based simulations, folks, notice you have either 2 problems generally or 3 problems many times in your testlet that has these problems. Look, it's like 5 multiple choice rolled together with a lot of given information. So what I tell people is, like, think of a statement of cash flow. I've given an example of how that could be tested in multiple choice. How could that be tested in a task-based simulation? They want you to calculate the company's ending cash. They'll give you a full-blown comparative balance sheet, 2 years, current year income statement, and lots of footnotes to that information. You've got to calculate operating cash flow, investing, financing, net it all out, get your change in cash, find your beginning cash, add it to the change, get your ending cash. Lots of calculations to do, lots of exhibits to go through. Even if it were an open book test, folks, the task-based simulations could be challenging because of the volume of information. So you're going to learn good technique in the course. We have these problem-solving workshops where I'm going to walk you through how you read and set it up so you're not wasting valuable exam time. Because 2 people might do really well on that simulation, but it takes one person 35 minutes and it takes somebody else 10 minutes, believe it or not. I call it legalized cheating. You always start with the questions first. What do they want me to do with this given information? So if they ask me to calculate cash flow from operations, the only way they're going to test that is in the indirect method. You're going to set up your formula, and then you're going to cherry pick the relevant information from the various exhibits and plug in that information as you go along. They love giving you distractor information exam day that has no bearing on the solution. That's why you never start with the facts. You look at the questions first, you set it up, then you'll plug in your relevant information. Jack, how many hours do you have per part?
4 hours per
4
part.
hours. Jack, when was the last time you sat down 4 hours uninterrupted and didn't pick up this thing? How long?
I would probably say last night.
You sat down 4 hours uninterrupted?
Yeah,
I love it.
I had to study for a tax exam that I actually have after
Beautiful. All right, 4-hour increments, folks. Why? Because you can't afford to get anything wrong exam day, because in the last 30 minutes, you're burnt out, and now you're starting to make silly mistakes because you can't focus. Can you imagine failing this exam with a 72, 73, 74? Because you knew the content but made silly mistakes? You need to study in 4-hour increments to build up that mental endurance. Any review course that tells you, just sit down for, what the hell are you going to learn in 10 minutes? And the CPA exam is not a TikTok video. You can't work a bond question and say, I'm tired. I'll come back tomorrow and do the consolidation. The exam is not given in bite-sized, right-sized pieces. Forget that nonsense. Build up your mental endurance like Jack did last night and be able to sit down 4 hours uninterrupted, no problem, focusing and working problems and questions. All righty. You cannot sit for this exam anytime throughout the year. The core test dates, you have generally 6 weeks in every quarter where you're eligible to take a part of the exam. Whereas for the disciplines are actually 5 or 6 weeks. For the core test dates, you might have works out to be about 8 weeks during a particular quarter. So it's not year-round testing. So you want to be mindful when you put together your study plan when you can sit for a particular part of the exam. As I mentioned earlier, you could theoretically sit for a discipline first, but that would be insane. That's like taking advanced accounting before you've studied for principles of financial. Nobody would do that. To make sure that you have enough time now, because of the delay in getting you the scores, they have increased the amount of time you have to pass, not all 4, just the remaining 3. Remember, the first part you sign up for, you could take as long as necessary to properly prepare. That's why you do the hardest part first. And then your 3 remaining parts, you generally have 30 or 36 months to finish the remaining parts. New Jersey's 30. It could move to 36 months. We'll keep you apprised of all that stuff, but this was as of January 25th. All righty. Study habits, you ready? What are the top tips to get you properly prepared? When you study for part number 1, financial, give yourself a margin for error, a cushion in case things turn out to be harder than you thought, or something comes up personally, professionally, or academically. So I'm going to recommend that you give yourself a minimum of 3 months before you want that particular test date you want. Back up 3 months. That's when you should start studying for financial. And if you got C's in intermediate or advanced accounting, back up at least 4 months before your projected exam date. Slow and steady wins the race. So if you give yourself plenty of time, you can digest. It's too much to memorize. You got to spend a lot of time practicing and understanding, which takes a lot more time than just trying to memorize. And memorization don't get you a lot of points anymore. Cranking out formulas you've merely memorized. Remember, a lot of this is analysis or evaluation or application. You got to understand what it is you're doing. So again, 3 to 4 months before you start studying for FAR. Multiple choice is a great way to reinforce your knowledge. You could cover a lot of ground with that topic, working multiple choice. And it's not a tremendous deep dive into the content. So if you make a mistake, you know what? You'll be able to correct it pretty quickly. You want to do your multiple choice after you watch your lectures. So what happens is, for most topics, I'll walk you through the lecture, what it is you need to know. We'll do some practice questions together. We'll stop that subtopic, maybe 20 or 30 minutes. You'll go back and work a series of multiple choice to say, okay, I've reinforced that. Then you'll move on to your next subtopic. So you watch the lectures, you then do your multiple choice. Wait to simulate. Simulations, as I mentioned, could be challenging, even if it were open book, because of the volume of information you have exam day to go through. So you don't want to still be struggling with the basic fundamentals of that topic, because then you're never going to be able to answer that question. So you do your multiple choice, get your confidence level up, then you'll apply it to your task-based simulations. You've got to do cumulative reviews along the way as you're preparing for this exam. You can't study something in week 1 and then not look at it for 2 months or 3 months until you do your final review. Every part you sit for, a third of the way through, stop before you learn your next new topic, do a cumulative review of the first third. You get 2/3 of the way through the course, stop, do a cumulative review of your first 2/3, and then when you're done with the course, you'll do your final review. Again, you have to keep this information fresh in your mind. So one of the biggest issues we get is people feel like, hey, Pete, did I do enough questions? Have I done well enough in this topic that I can move on to the next topic? Our software called SmartPath is going to show you both volume of questions worked, percentage of correct, and hey, have you hit a big enough target, both in terms of volume of questions and percent correct, to move on confidently to your next subtopic. But you got to be keeping that information fresh as you move along. When you put together your study plan, preferably the last 2 weeks before the exam date, you are not learning anything new. The last 2 weeks should be strictly for reviewing what you've been studying for the past 2 or 2.5 or 3 months. So the last 2 weeks, you'll do your cumulative review, then you'll do your practice exams, 2 or 3 practice exams that are really designed to help you navigate timing. First 2 hours or less on the multiple choice, last 2 hours on your simulations. About how much time are you going to spend on Testlet 1, Testlet 2, so on and so forth. You got to spread it out. Okay, you cannot take those practice exams the day before the actual exam. Nobody runs a marathon the day before the actual marathon. You got to spread it out. So if you found an issue while doing the practice exam, you have time to remedy that defect. You don't want to do it the day before the exam. Jack already established 4-hour increments. By the time we get to exam day, you should have no issue sitting down 4 hours uninterrupted and concentrate. So you have no excuse exam day. And look, we are not a shortcut. This is not about preparing you. A 75 is what you need to pass. Screw that. You're studying to get an 85. Why? Because if you have a terrible day exam day, you know what? An 85 you didn't get, you got a 76. But you're not going to study to get a 75 and then you have a crappy day and wind up with a 68. That ain't going to happen. So you are going to be thoroughly prepared exam day. You're going to make a commitment to make this happen. Part of that commitment is talking to your significant other, your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever's in your life. You need to explain to them the time and effort you've got to put in to prepare for these exams. And they cannot be sitting around busting your chops saying, you're a boring accountant. All you ever do is study. I'm going to go out and find, let them go out and find somebody else. Because after you get past the CPA exam, you're going to be making so much more money. Chances are you're going to upgrade anyway. Isn't that right, Jack? All right. So the UWORLD CPA review course, built from the ground up using the AI CPA blueprints that were released in 2023 to get you prepared for 2024. Everything is mapped to exactly what the AI CPA gave us, so you know you're getting the proper coverage of the topics that are testable exam day and the way they're likely to be tested, multiple choice or task-based simulation. Do what we're telling you to do. And there's a 94% pass rate, folks, for people who do what we're telling them to do. You follow the smart path technology, you're not only going to pass, you're going to kick ass on these exams. I'm the global lead instructor, but Rogers, I mentioned earlier, world renowned. Google Roger. He is beloved in the industry, second to none, amongst the highest rated CPA review instructors for decades, because he's a down to earth, super smart, but funny guy that's going to keep you engaged in these lectures and give you tips to help you remember the information exam day. But we are a consolidation of like 4 different review courses, the best of the best. 2 people I want to highlight here, Suzanne Youngberg and Greg Carnes. When you talk about tax, there are other review courses that have people teaching tax that have never worked in public accounting. There are people in other review courses teaching audit that have never worked in public accounting. How does that work? These are people not only that have worked in public accounting and not only have a degree in accounting, but oftentimes a PhD or a master's in accounting, in addition to authors of some of the best-selling textbooks in the US. That's right, Suzanne and Greg, you look at the tax textbook, not only for individual, but entity tax as well. These people literally wrote the book. You're not going to find more informed instructors than Greg and Suzanne in tax. Incredible team across the board. Again, our course is set up so everything is aligned with the CPA the blueprint. As I mentioned, we emphasize what the weight of the topic is and the skill level required. Everything in our textbook, lecture 1.01, aligns exactly to what financial statement analysis in this example. Well, what was the first topic in the blueprint? Lecture 1.02, what was the second topic? So everything is aligned 1 for 1 with what you see in the blueprint. There's no shortcut to success, folks. Anyone who gives you an exam, a textbook that is not highlighting what the task is, the skill level, is doing you a disservice. Everything needs to be aligned for you to see what's expected of you exam day. This is an excerpt of a question that was released by the AI CPA, given to all the CPA review providers. If you want to have a good laugh later, take a picture of that answer explanation and read it through. It says nothing. It's nonsense. It doesn't even tell you why C is correct. Never mind telling you why A, B, and D are wrong, because C is correct, but then they don't even explain why C is correct. It's insanity. This is a big difference with UWorld. First of all, every question in the software is going to tell you what percentage of the candidates picked that particular choice. So you get a good feel at, am I in good company? So if 98% of people got a question correct and you're in the 2% that got it wrong, you got some work to do. But not only do we give you those stats, but for every question, we tell you, hey, here are the core concepts being illustrated by that particular question. And then we're going to tell you not only why the right answer is right, but why the wrong answers were wrong. And for every single multiple choice question, there's a takeaway. At the end of the day, this is the key concept that was being illustrated in this particular question. And then you could take anything in our detailed explanatory answer, click on it, and create your own flashcard to help you remember the rule illustrated in that question. And it's not only what you get wrong, folks. If you get it right, but you got it right for the wrong reason, you got it wrong. Or if you got it right, but it took you 10 minutes, you got it wrong because you don't have anywhere near 10 minutes per question. So there's a lot of information you could get from every explanatory answer, in addition to it being linked back to the lecture in the course in case you need an explanation a second time around. But if you wanted to ask me what one of the best features of the course is outside of the instructors, the smart path technology. You might have 300 questions in inventory. And you're like, shit, Pete, if I did all 300 questions in inventory, it's going to take me a week. Like, do I really need to do all that? Absolutely not. If you say to me, Pete, I got 100% on the questions, but you only worked 20 questions, I'm not very impressed. If there's 300 and you only did 20, that's not a good sample size. Conversely, if you say, Pete, I did 200 questions, but I only got 50% correct, I'm not very impressed. It's a scale based upon the number of questions you worked and the percent correct. Your goal is to turn every one of those lines that are keeping track of your progress green. That means you've hit the target that historically the people who have passed the exam and used this same software for that particular topic, that puts you in that confidence interval. Hey, 94% of the people who did that, they were able to pass the exam. And you want to turn every one of those lines to green. You want to talk about a study planner? Tell us when you want to sit for the exam. Tell us on average how many days you have, how many hours you have per week, per day. Like you might say, Pete, I'm going to do the bulk of my studies on Saturdays and Sundays. Okay, cool. How many hours Saturday, Sunday? You might say, Pete, Monday through Thursday, I'm only going to put in an hour. We will put together your study plan that breaks down for you day by day what you need to be doing topic by topic so you could be properly prepared exam day. In addition, it's dynamic. So if you find a topic is easier than you thought, you might be able to allocate more time to other topics that are coming in the next few weeks. Conversely, if a topic was more challenging than you thought, the study planner will adapt and say, well, listen, you need to increase the number of hours this week and this week because you need additional reinforcement in that particular topic. All righty. So everything you need to prepare is here for you. But folks, at the end of the day, it's your desire, it's your commitment. Look, you've got to want to make this happen. And I've already established it's not your love of accounting. You've got to look at your future and forget about money and opportunity. Think about the crappiest job you've ever worked. And can you imagine being stuck in a job you dislike? I can't guarantee these letters are going to take you to a pathway to the stars, but I can tell you this. Having those 3 letters makes it far more likely you will have more job opportunities if you don't like what you're doing. And it's a generalist credential. Whether you take TCP, ISC, the bar exam, you're not a specialist. You're still an accountant that can do tax or audit or advisory or consulting. It opens so many doors for you the rest of your life. So as a young professional, you can find what it is you like to do. There's a code here. The list price is so much more expensive than this. So this is a special pricing for the FDU students. If you're interested, you could take a picture of the code and you could use that to sign up for the course. In addition, we are working deals with all the firms across the US and globally, whether they direct bill or they reimburse. And you might say, oh, don't they only use XYZ? Possibly they have a contract that hasn't expired yet. But firms want to give you the best chance to pass the exam, and they want to make sure that you're taking the course that's best for you to properly prepare for the exam. And don't just ask people what course they took. Ask them who their favorite instructor was in the course that they took. And that'll be telling, and do your own due diligence. Sample a lecture. Say, hey, can this person, Roger, myself, or others, Suzanne, Greg, is this going to resonate with my style of learning? That's what should guide you, okay? Lastly, this is our Senior VP of e-learning. She will help onboard you not only with the course, but if you have any questions about your transcript, if you're going to work out of the state of New Jersey, anything and everything, Charlotte's the one who's going to walk you through everything in the onboarding process. Notice the schedule, applications. She's the resident expert. Anything you need, Charlotte's wonderful, and she'll help you through whatever you need to get you to the next step, okay? Jack, what do you got? You guys got questions for me or what?
I think you've answered all of our questions very, very well. We are.
You just want to go to the bar and start studying bar. Am I right about that, Jack?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
ready. Yeah, so we really don't have any questions because we just answered all of our questions, and that was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, Peter, for coming to speak to us today.
You got it. My pleasure, guys. I wish you guys the best of luck. Hopefully in the fall, I'll be on your campus in person, Jack. So get me there in person.
We will make sure that happens. Trust me.
You got it. Good luck, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. And then members, stay behind real quick just for announcements.
All right. So I stopped sharing, so I'm going to jump off so you can do your thing. All right. See you later.
See you later. All righty. That was a great meeting. So next week, if I have my calendar up here, who are we bringing in next? All right, Joe, you have it? who are we bringing in next week? Because I do not want to mess up who we bring in. If you've not done your tutoring hours yet, please do them. Induction, Wilkin Gun and Plant. So they'll be coming in next week. I think they're coming in person, I think. I reached out to them Wednesday today, hopefully get a confirmation email about that. But yeah, so that is it for this week's meeting. Thank you guys so much. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to one of the e-board members, Professor McGregor or Professor Sampath. And yeah, and have a great week. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you.